At first, it sounded like an ordinary royal evening, a formal gathering, polished smiles, carefully chosen words, the familiar rituals of a family that has spent generations learning how to conceal tension behind perfect manners. But according to the account we are examining, something happened that night that cut through all of that. Princess Anne allegedly turned to Queen Camilla and challenged the very title she now holds. The words were simple, but their meaning was anything but. Because behind that alleged confrontation was a much larger question, one involving the memory of Queen Elizabeth II, the legacy of Diana, the position of a woman who married into the royal family, and the future balance of power inside the House of Windsor. And if the reported exchange really happened, there was something even more significant about it. Princess Anne was not simply questioning Camilla. She was, according to the account, defending an older understanding of what the monarchy was supposed to be. So why would Anne take such a position? Why has her relationship with Camilla been portrayed as so difficult? And why does the shadow of Diana continue to appear whenever the two women are discussed? To understand that, we have to look beyond the palace walls. Because the tension between Anne and Camilla did not begin with a title. Its roots go back much further. Princess Anne has spent almost her entire adult life inside the machinery of the British monarchy, yet she has never appeared particularly interested in playing the part expected of her. She has built a reputation for bluntness, discipline, and an almost relentless commitment to duty. Since the age of 18, she has carried out thousands of official engagements, and the source account describes more than 20,000 over the course of her public life. Between 2002 and 2022 alone, it states that she completed 11,088 engagements. Those figures tell us something important about Anne. She is not a royal who needs to be reminded of her responsibilities. She has spent decades proving them. And perhaps that helps explain why her opinions can carry unusual weight within the family. Anne is also known for refusing to follow every traditional expectation placed upon royals. She chose not to give royal titles to her own children. She has often approached public duties in a remarkably practical manner. She has even been known to drive herself to engagements rather than rely entirely upon the elaborate arrangements surrounding senior members of the family. Her public image has never been built around glamour. It has been built around work. And that difference matters. Because when Anne challenges something, the implication is not necessarily that she is seeking attention. It may simply be that she believes something needs to be said. That reputation has followed her for decades. The media once portrayed her as aloof. Her blunt manner even earned her the notorious nickname, her royal rudeness, after a 1982 incident involving photographers. Yet beneath that reputation was something quite different, a profound sense of service. Her charitable work, including her long association with Save the Children, reflected a commitment that went far beyond ceremonial appearances. She became involved with causes ranging from accessible sailing to the National Lighthouse Museum. Her approach was rarely theatrical. She simply carried on, and that is why her alleged confrontation with Camilla becomes so intriguing. If Anne really did challenge the Queen's position, it would not have come from someone unfamiliar with royal duty. It would have come from one of its longest-serving practitioners. But there was another reason the relationship between these two women has attracted so much attention. And this is where the story becomes deeply personal. Long before Camilla became queen, there was another man connecting the two women, Andrew Parker Bowles. According to the source account, Anne had once been deeply involved with Andrew. Their relationship was serious. There was reportedly a future they could imagine together, but there was a problem that, at the time, could not simply be ignored. Andrew was Catholic. Anne was a member of the Church of England. Under the rules then governing succession in royal marriage, that religious difference created a barrier. Their relationship ended, and eventually, Andrew married Camilla. For Anne, according to the account, the circumstances were painful. The man she had once hoped to marry had gone on to marry another woman who would eventually become part of her own royal world. But that was not the end of the story, because years later, Camilla would become the wife of Anne's brother, Charles. The situation had come full circle in a way that could hardly have been more complicated. The woman who had married Anne's former partner was now married to Anne's brother, and suddenly, a chapter from Anne's personal past was sitting inside the center of the royal family. It is important, however, to distinguish between what is documented and what has been inferred. The source presents this history as a possible explanation for the reported coolness between Anne and Camilla, but it does not establish Anne's private feelings as fact. And that distinction matters, because royal families have always generated stories around silence. A glance becomes a message, a distance becomes evidence, a formal exchange becomes a supposed feud. Yet sometimes the most important thing is not what people say, it is what they refuse to say. At Charles and Camilla's wedding in 2005, reports of Anne appearing distant from Camilla attracted attention. Observers interpreted her posture and manner as signs of disapproval. But whatever Anne personally felt, she remained connected to Andrew Parker Bowles. The source even notes that Andrew became godfather to Anne's daughter. That continuing friendship inevitably created another layer of speculation. Could Camilla have resented the closeness between Anne and Andrew? Again, that remains a matter of reported interpretation rather than established fact, but it illustrates why their relationship has been so fascinating to the public. There were old connections everywhere, past relationships, family loyalties, new marriages, and a monarchy in which personal history rarely disappears completely. Then came another revealing moment. The coronation of Charles. Anne appeared on horseback in full military regalia. It was a striking image. Camilla was beginning a new chapter as queen. Charles was taking his place as king. And Anne, in her own unmistakable way, appeared as a reminder of continuity, of duty, of the older generation, of the bloodline into which she had been born. The source interprets that appearance as a statement of Anne's position within the family. Whether one accepts that interpretation or not, the symbolism was powerful, because by this point, Camilla had traveled an extraordinary distance, once deeply controversial, once viewed by many as an outsider, now queen. But acceptance had never come easily, and the public had its own verdict to deliver. For years, Camilla's name was inseparable from the collapse of Charles and Diana's marriage. To millions of people, Diana represented something almost sacred. She was the princess who had captured the public imagination, the woman whose image had become woven into modern British history. And Camilla entered the story from the opposite direction. She was associated with the breakdown of the marriage. Fairly or unfairly, that became the image many people carried. Even after Charles and Camilla married in 2005, those memories did not simply vanish. Their wedding itself reflected the sensitivity surrounding the relationship. It was a civil ceremony rather than the kind of grand royal wedding many might have expected. The path to acceptance had to be careful. Even Queen Elizabeth II had reportedly been uncertain about the union. The Church of England also opposed the marriage in light of Camilla's previous divorce, so Camilla entered married life not surrounded by universal celebration, but by years of accumulated controversy. And yet, she did not retreat. Instead, she worked. She became involved in causes concerning osteoporosis. She supported victims of domestic abuse. She promoted literacy. She championed animal welfare. Over time, those efforts began to alter the public perception of her. For some people, the woman who had once been defined almost entirely by controversy became something more complicated. A working royal, a patron, a campaigner, a woman who had learned to carry criticism without answering every accusation. But there was one problem no amount of charitable work could completely erase: Diana's memory. For many members of the public, Diana remained the people's princess, and that meant Camilla could become queen without ever becoming Diana. She could wear the title, she could stand beside Charles, she could carry out the duties, but she could not simply replace the emotional place Diana occupied in the public imagination. That distinction is crucial, because the reported tension between Anne and Camilla was not occurring in a vacuum. It was unfolding against decades of history, and then another royal relationship entered the picture: Camilla and Catherine. At first glance, there appeared to be nothing particularly unusual. Both women had important roles. Both were expected to represent the monarchy with dignity. Both understood the importance of public appearances. But according to the source account, their relationship was not always entirely warm. When Catherine first entered royal life, she reportedly did not receive the same immediate confidence from Camilla that she received from Queen Elizabeth II. The accounts suggest that Camilla had doubts about Catherine's ability to adapt to the demands of royal life. These claims are not established as fact, but they form part of the narrative surrounding the two women. And over time, something interesting happened. Catherine became increasingly popular. The public responded to her calm manner, her elegance, her ability to handle enormous attention without appearing overwhelmed. Her charitable work also gave her a distinct identity within the monarchy, and gradually, a comparison began to emerge. Camilla had spent decades trying to earn public acceptance. Catherine appeared to receive much of it naturally. That difference could create tension in any institution, but within a royal household, where every gesture is observed and every position has meaning, the contrast becomes even more striking. Was there really a rivalry? The source suggests there may have been, but again, there is no firm evidence establishing a private competition between the two women. What we do know is that both occupied important places within a changing monarchy, and both carried very different public images. Camilla represented endurance, Catherine increasingly represented continuity, and beneath both stories was the same extraordinary figure, Diana. Her presence remains impossible to ignore, especially when discussing William, because William was not simply Charles's son, he was Diana's son, and that made Camilla's place in his life particularly complicated. According to the source, Camilla was apprehensive when she first encountered the young William. He was still a teenager, his parents' marriage had broken down, his mother had become one of the most famous women in the world, and Camilla knew that she occupied a sensitive place in the story of his family. Would William blame her? Would he resent her? Would he ever accept her? Those questions would have been difficult enough under ordinary circumstances. But nothing about royal life was ordinary. Years passed. William and Camilla eventually developed a relationship based on public courtesy and royal duty. Yet the source describes a certain reserve, a careful distance, an understanding that some wounds cannot simply be erased because people grow older. And this is where the story becomes more significant, because William is not merely another member of the royal family. One day, he is expected to become king. And whenever the future reign of William is discussed, questions naturally arise about what place Camilla might occupy within it. The source contains speculation that William could make decisions affecting Camilla's role when he eventually becomes king, but speculation is not the same as policy. There is no established evidence in the source confirming such plans. Still, the possibility raises a fascinating question. What happens to old royal relationships when the generation changes? What happens when the son becomes king? What happens when the memories carried by one generation meet the priorities of another? Those questions may matter more in the future than any disagreement reported today. And there is another reason Catherine has become so important to this story. To many observers, she carries echoes of Diana, not because she is identical to her, she is not, but because of the qualities people associate with both women. A certain accessibility, a calm public presence, an ability to connect with ordinary people, and a sense that, despite the grandeur surrounding them, they remain recognizably human. Catherine's journey began long before she became one of the most visible women in Britain. She met William at St. Andrews University in 2001. Their relationship developed from friendship into romance. It survived difficulties, breakups, media scrutiny, and the enormous expectations surrounding life inside the royal family. What followed was a gradual transformation. Catherine learned the demands of royal life. She developed her own charitable interests. She became particularly associated with mental health and early childhood development. And slowly, she established an identity that was not simply William's wife. That matters because the modern monarchy depends heavily on the personalities representing it, and Catherine's popularity created another powerful dynamic. She became a future queen in the eyes of the public. Camilla was already queen. Anne remained the senior working royal whose reputation had been built over decades. 3 women, 3 generations, 3 very different relationships with the institution, and behind them all, the same question: what kind of monarchy will Britain have in the years ahead? For Anne, Tradition has always appeared central to her identity. For Camilla, survival and adaptation have been essential. For Catherine, the challenge has been to represent continuity while appearing modern and relatable. Their positions are different, their histories are different, and their relationships with the public are different, yet the palace brings them together. That is what makes every reported disagreement so fascinating, because inside the royal family, there is rarely such a thing as a purely personal matter. A disagreement between two people can become a question about hierarchy. A question about hierarchy can become a question about tradition. And a question about tradition can become a question about the future of the crown itself. That brings us back to Princess Anne. If the reported confrontation with Camilla did happen, why would Anne choose that moment to speak? Was she genuinely defending the wishes associated with Queen Elizabeth II? Was she expressing a long-standing belief about the difference between those born into the royal family and those who marry into it? Or was the story itself another example of how royal silence becomes filled with assumptions? The source claims that Anne reminded Camilla of the late Queen's preference for the title Queen Consort. That allegation places Elizabeth's legacy at the center of the disagreement, and that is significant, because Elizabeth II spent decades embodying continuity. Her reign was built around duty, restraint, and stability. For Anne, who served alongside her mother for much of that time, those values were not abstract. They were part of everyday life. So when the monarchy changed after Elizabeth's death, Anne was not simply watching a new king and queen emerge. She was watching the institution she had known for decades enter a new era. And perhaps that is the real tension beneath the story. Not simply Anne versus Camilla, not simply one title against another, but the old monarchy meeting the new one. Charles wants to shape his reign. Camilla has fought for decades to establish her place within it. Anne remains deeply attached to the traditions that shaped her life. William represents the future. Catherine increasingly represents the next generation. And Diana's memory still occupies a place in the emotional history of the family. All of these forces exist at once. That is why the palace can appear calm, while enormous questions are being quietly negotiated underneath. There may be no shouting, no dramatic public declaration, no obvious confrontation. Sometimes the most revealing moments are much quieter. A pause, a look, a decision about a title, a change in protocol, a person standing slightly apart. And then, suddenly, the public begins asking questions. What is really happening? Who is gaining influence? Who is protecting tradition? Who is shaping the future? And perhaps most importantly, who will define the monarchy when the next generation takes control? For Camilla, the journey has been extraordinary. She entered public life under the shadow of one of the most painful chapters in modern royal history. She faced criticism that followed her for years. She married Charles despite the controversy. She built a working role through charitable causes. She gradually earned greater public acceptance, and eventually she became queen. That transformation alone would have been remarkable, but becoming queen did not erase the past. It simply placed her in a position where the past followed her into the palace. Anne carries one version of that history. William carries another. Catherine represents a new chapter shaped partly by that history, and the British public carries its own memories. That is why Camilla's position remains so fascinating. Her story is neither entirely a story of rejection, nor entirely a story of triumph. It is something more complicated. A woman who spent years trying to become accepted eventually reached the highest position available to her, but acceptance and affection are not necessarily the same thing. And history is rarely rewritten simply because a title changes. Perhaps that is the lesson behind the alleged confrontation with Anne. Titles matter, but history matters more. A crown can be placed on someone's head. A title can be formally changed. A royal role can be carefully defined. But public memory cannot be ordered into existence, and family history cannot simply be erased. The question now is what happens next. Will Anne and Camilla remain divided by the traditions and memories that surround them? Will William's eventual reign change the balance again? Will Catherine's growing role alter the way the public sees the royal family? And will Camilla's long campaign for acceptance finally overcome the controversies that have followed her for decades? No one can know for certain, and perhaps that uncertainty is precisely what makes this story so compelling, because beneath the crowns, the ceremonies and the palace walls are people carrying old memories into a very different future. Princess Anne carries the memory of the queen she served, William carries the memory of his mother, Camilla carries the memory of a relationship that survived years of opposition, Catherine represents a generation looking forward, and Charles stands at the center of all of it, a king caught between the history of his family and the monarchy he wants to build. So perhaps the real question is not whether one royal woman can challenge another. It is whether a family shaped by decades of history can truly move forward without bringing that history with them. Because the palace may change, the titles may change, the faces may change, but some memories remain. And as long as those memories continue to shape the people inside the palace, the most important royal battles may not be the ones we see in public. They may be the ones fought quietly, behind closed doors.